I think we're going to get started now. I'd like to welcome everyone who's here tonight. Thanks. Hi, my name is Lisa Sharp, and I'm the current president of the board for the First Unitarian Congregation of Ottawa. And we'd like to warmly welcome everyone who's here tonight to this special gathering. And first, I'd like to invite Colleen to join me in order that we can light our chalice together. And Colleen, you need to unmute yourself. Yep, got it.
Thank you, Lisa. We acknowledge that the land we are gathered on is located on traditional, unsurrendered, and unceded Algonquin Anishinaabeg territory, and that First Nation peoples have been stewards of the land since time immemorial, and they treat the land, its plants, animals, stories, and people with honor and respect. The work of reconciliation is a responsibility of our First U congregation and of all Canadians. Our goal is to educate ourselves and all who have ears to hear, to be of service to each other and to those at risk, and to advocate for justice.
Thank you. Now I'd like to invite Eva Berenger to join me. And Eva is one of the members of our Social Justice Action Network and specifically part of our Environmental Action Group. And she's here to tell you a little bit about tonight's program. So I'll hand it over to Eva. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Lisa. Before I introduce our guest speaker, I just want to give a brief background on the Ajashki project. As most of you know, First U is working to become a certified Green Sanctuary congregation. Green Sanctuary, which is a UUA or Unitarian Universalist Association program, was revamped in 2020 to focus on climate change. That made it an ideal fit for us as a congregation, as we'd already voted to make climate action the focus of our social responsibility activities for a 4-year period. Green Sanctuary requires us to develop campaigns in 3 areas, and my phone's ringing, wouldn't you know it? Mitigation, adaptation, and climate justice. The first 2 are easy, and we've had great ideas on what we could do for those, but we knew climate justice would be a stretch for us because the way Green Sanctuary wants us to do it requires us to think differently about how we do social justice, to move beyond simply giving money to listening and helping support rather than being in control. About the same time, during a listening circle, an Indigenous elder shared with us the need for action on food security and for a learning center. And we were put in touch with Kayoki Whiteduck, who you'll meet tonight, and are thrilled to be helping him move forward on his heart's desire to harness the potential of youth leaders by promoting access to Indigenous culture and language related to ancestral gardening practices. The focus is to create meaningful, hands-on learning pathways to support Indigenous and non-Indigenous youth, and perhaps even help them transition to employment in horticulture or farming. Before I introduce Kayoki, I do want to recognize Sharon Bowen. Without her determination, vision, and can-do attitude, Ajashki would not have happened. And also Lynn Kaufbill-Preston, who has also worked tirelessly to help make Ajashki a reality. If you showed up on a Thursday during the summer, you would have seen Sharon and Lynn there working with Kayoki. And also thanks to Lisa and Mariella and Michelle, who provided support behind the scenes. We're so pleased to have Kayoki as the project lead and Ajashki's food and climate educator. Kayoki is a young Algonquin Anishinaabe farmer with a view to the future. He is a horticulturalist, an entrepreneur, a student of the earth. Kayoki is a graduate of the Horticultural Technician Program at Camosun College. While there, he worked with the Camison Food Farm Box program to provide organic food to low-income students. He won a silver medal for landscape design in a BC competition with Skills Canada and placed first in an Indigenous powwow pitch competition with participants from across Turtle Island. He is also a graduate of the Western Herbalism program at the International Academy of Health Education, Ottawa. Kayoki is, and this is quite an accomplishment, the first Indigenous member of the Canadian Agriculture Youth Council, which provides advice to Agriculture Canada, and has been chosen to be the co-chair for the Council's Climate Change Working Group. Kayoki has also participated in the Kitigan-Zibi Anishinaabeg Culture Workshops summer training session with elders, working with the coordinator to develop traditional cultural skills, developing his knowledge of the use and identification of Indigenous plants, trees, and animal material. He has hands-on experience planting and assessing trees for large-scale forestry operations, planting food gardens with students at Kitigan-Zibi, and he has designed a forestry field guide about culturally significant plants for the forestry department in the community. And in addition to that, since 2016, Kayoki has managed his own business called Midigamen, I hope I got that right, Kayoki, Agriculture, growing, producing, and selling organic herbal teas and plant products. He brings all of this very impressive experience to his role as food and climate educator for Ajashki, and we are just so thrilled to be working with him. Kayoki.
Oh, thank you, Eva, for that marvelous introduction. Kwei, and hello, everybody. Yeah, I'm Kayoki Whiteduck. I'm glad to be here this evening. So yeah, this evening I'm going to talk a bit about the Ajashki project and what we have been doing and what we want to do. So I thought I'd start off with a story about somebody from my community, being that this is a food security project. I like to just tell this story of a man in my community named John McConney. He's actually my cousin's grandfather. But he, way back in the day, was taken and he went to residential school where he was there for a few months. Then after a few months, he decided he had enough of it, so he left and faced a harsh winter by himself. He left the school, he ran away and survived by himself in the woods, primarily by snaring rabbits. He survived many months in the bush by himself until he could finally get to a community of other Algonquins where he then thought he'd be safe from any Indian agents. So I just wanted to explain that story just because it's about, he survived by his ways of what he was taught in terms of gathering his own food. That's how he's able to survive at his house, survive by himself at the age of, I believe he was 10 years old, if I'm correct, when he was taken and he left. So yeah, it's pretty crazy. Yeah, so now I'm going to go into a bit about how the creation of the Ajashki and how it all started. I believe Eva touched on that already by the elder Verna McGregor, who when I believe it was Susan Tanner asked her what we should do at the First U campus. That's when Verna said you should create an Indigenous Learning Center. Now that is a pretty big step to take. So a few of the people, I believe on the Environmental Action Working Group, decided that maybe we should start with a food security project to make our way up to that. People in that working group contacted a man named Larry Whiteduck, who happens to be my uncle, who works at the Assembly of First Nations. And they approached him about this idea, and that's when he gave them my contact information. And then Sharon contacted me along with Lynn and Anita McLean. And that's when the concept of Ajashki was born. From then we started meeting. So that happened in about, I believe, October of 2020. And then after that, we began meeting every week to kind of start developing this concept of Ajashki and the food security program that they wish to make. So over the next coming months, we started working on ideas, and we came up with a vision for the program. And the vision was to create an Indigenous-led food security program in an urban setting, the urban setting being Ottawa. Some of the goals that we had for the program was to establish and run a food garden where we could produce food to combat food insecurity. Engage with youth was our primary target. Create a skills development program where these youth, our participants, would learn how to grow their own food, produce their own food, and also educate about agriculture, food insecurity, climate change, organic gardening, and native and traditional plants. So a few months later, due to the waves of COVID, we had a very slow start. I believe by the time May, June rolled around, when we wanted to get things going and get a garden started, we were in the middle of the second or third wave. So due to COVID, like many things in this day and age, we had a very slow start, but that didn't stop us. Eventually, we decided on a location at the campus of First U. We did explore a few other possibilities, but in the end, it turned out that they wouldn't work. So we finally decided we can work in the back of the First U campus by the Blue Spruce. So in the beginning of June, we started building the garden. We didn't have any participants yet, so it was just me, Lynn, and Sharon working on it, us three. We built the garden with primarily donations made by people that I would like to thank now. They include Susan Tanner, Mike Lloyd, and Mike Fletcher. Thank you for your donations to help us get the garden started. They were a very big help at the beginning. So we started every week, me, Lynn, and Sharon would gather, and we built one garden bed every week. We had a few different styles of garden beds that we made, but all of the materials we used to build the garden beds were donated materials. I believe one of the Mike's daughter's old tree house is now our kale and Swiss chard bed. And everything that wasn't recycled materials, it was materials that we went and found in the woods, being either the woods right beside First U towards the parkway, or the woods from back of my house. The only things we didn't gather ourselves or recycle was the soil and compost that we ordered from a business in Ottawa. Moving on to July. In July is when we got our first participant named Ray. And we came up with a name for our participants called Future Food Warriors. This is, I came up with this name because we wanted a name to describe what we want out of these people. We want, once these people graduate or finish this program, we want them to have the knowledge and the skills to help combat food insecurity, being where they can have all the skills and knowledge to grow their own food. And not just that, but also teach others how to grow their own food as well, and harvest and forage their own food to teach other people. We then got another participant who came later, I believe at the end of July or in early August, named Jordan. So when we got our first Future Food Warrior, we started with teaching about gardening basics. We started right from the beginning, from how to build your own garden bed, what plants are considered weeds and what plants aren't, how to water plants properly, real basic gardening. We have to start somewhere. So those are things we started with. And then also at the same time, we developed a lunch program. So we were growing food in our garden, and our lunch programs, when we first started, we were just buying stuff from the store and then kind of serving that up for lunch. But in about mid-July, we started having some produce ready in our garden, which was primarily kale and Swiss chard. And so we started harvesting the kale and Swiss chard and making a lot of salads. We ate a lot of kale and Swiss chard salads at the beginning of the program, which is good healthy lunch. You get tired of them pretty quickly. We later moved to kale and other things in wraps, which was good. But these lunch programs were very important because we not only want to show with this program how to produce and like grow and produce your own food, but also how to take that food that we produce and prepare food that you'll be able to make something with, you know, because you can grow all the kale in the world, but if you're just eating kale off a stick like that, you're probably not going to want to eat it all the time. So preparing the food is a big part of learning in this project as well. And so yeah, every lunchtime we would go out and harvest some food from the garden and bring it in and eat. We'd eat lunch from it, and whatever wasn't eaten, the participants were allowed to bring home. So they also got some food to bring home at the end of almost each day. Some other stuff we started doing was plant ID walks around the First U campus. I myself am fairly knowledgeable about wild and edible plants, and I think it's a very underutilized food source nowadays. There's tons of weeds and even ornamental flowers that are edible that are generally overlooked these days. When we started the garden, there was a patch of orange daylilies in the middle of the garden, and I remember we started taking some of those flower petals and mixing them into our salads. So we went and did walks around First U, and I told them what ornamental plants were edible and what wild weeds that we found, but are also edible. And occasionally we made our lunches with that as well. One day we made a pesto out of garlic mustard, which is an invasive species that there's no shortage of at the First U campus. I'm sure some of you know. So yeah, we also told them showed them how to build garden beds was one of the first things. We built 5 before the first participant showed up, but after that we finished building the rest, and by the end of it we had built garden beds for tomatoes, peppers, kale, Swiss chard, zucchini, cucumbers, strawberries, and raspberries, as well as we grew some tomatoes in pots as well to demonstrate container gardening. One of the things that we also started doing is we acquired a black composting bin because we also want to teach how to make your own compost to also limit not only food waste, but how to use parts of the plants that we don't really use, how to turn that into compost. So we have that black bin. It's still in the garden right now, and it's full of stuff that will hopefully be compost next year that we will then turn into more food. We also showed them propagation. Propagation meaning starting plants either by seed or we did also a day of cuttings where I showed them how to propagate plants by taking cuttings of them. It was I got a really good feedback on that day. They were both very interested, as well as Sharon and Lynn were very interested on that day. Another thing we started doing was having watching documentaries with the participants. There was a few days where we had some serious rain, so instead of working outside, we watched some documentaries that had to do with either food security or climate change or agriculture or all three. Some of these documentaries include Kiss the Ground, Fantastic Fungi, and Biggest Little Farm, which all 3 are on Netflix, and I highly suggest everyone to watch them if they like that kind of thing. Some of the other things gardening that we taught them was pruning. There was some tomato plants. I taught them how to prune tomato plants to maximize your yields. Different styles of gardening. I myself know a bit about permaculture. So we taught them how to build different kinds of beds and different styles of gardening. The importance of mulching is another thing we went over. And one thing that we learned pretty hard about was pests. In the back of the First U campus, there was quite an abundance of squirrels living back there, who are pretty well-fed squirrels, I might add. But to me, that's a very important part of gardening, especially as a beginner. I remember when I first started gardening, I had planted my garden. Everything was in the ground, everything was starting to grow, looking good. And then one day, a deer just came in and chewed down all my tomatoes, which I was really discouraged about. And even the following years, I had other things go completely missing, just totally discouraging me. I used to get real angry and start cursing and being really, it make me change my mood for most of the day. But one thing I've learned is to try not to get too discouraged anytime something happens in the garden. Nowadays, I'm a lot better. Anytime I lose a crop to something, I say, oh, well, that's life, and just try to move on. There's no sense of getting super discouraged every time you lose something. I try to teach people now to plant more than you need, because chances are you're not going to get everything that you planted. This is, of course, different when you're a farmer that farms something that's a monoculture, meaning one crop, and you have a crop failure. That's different, but we don't teach those kinds of things. We teach about biodiversity and not monoculture, so that's not a problem for us. So another thing that we did is we planted some red oak trees along in the back of First U on the other side of the fence. We went one day, planted some red oaks. I think they may have been destroyed by city workers who came and cleared out the area. I'm not sure. We'll have to see next spring. I'd also like to just take this time today to say, if anybody listening to this would like red oaks, just contact either me or Lynn or Sharon, and I can bring some red oaks. And I have an abundance of red oak trees at about anywhere from 1.5 feet to 3 feet tall. So yeah, just contact me and I can get you some red oaks if you'd like, because we are also teaching about climate change. So we're also teaching about climate change mitigation. So planting trees is an important part for all of us to be doing. Another thing we did was we observed the first Truth and Reconciliation Day in September. We went to, I forget the name of a graveyard, but a graveyard near Sandy Hill, where we did a tour of a lot of the architects of the residential school system. As well, we got to see an art project done by many kids across Canada to honor the victims of the residential schools, the ones who never returned home. Yeah, and another thing that was really important for us in the program is anytime we had an abundance of food, excess food that generally usually was kale and Swiss chard that we weren't going to use, we made donations to the Parkdale Food Center. I think we did it about 3 or 4 times. We sent bags over to them and dropped them off for people who are in need. We find that really important. And later in this presentation, we will be showing a video about the Parkdale Food Center. Yeah. Now I would like to move on a little bit to about what we are currently doing with the Ajashki project. So in October, we had a closing ceremony in the garden, which some of you attended. I like to say a little prayer, a little thank you for everything the earth has provided us over the season. I do it in my garden as well. So we did a little closing ceremony at the garden, and now we're kind of in a period of transition. It's kind of winter's on its way, so there's no really working outside. So kind of figuring out what we want to do in the winter program of Ajashki. So Ajashki is registered as a heart garden, meaning it's to honor some of the residential school children who never returned home. Specifically, we are registered for the 215 children in Kamloops Residential School. So as a little winter way to honor them in the winter, we are taking 215 sticks and we're going to be placing them in the garden, and each stick will represent and honor one of the children who never returned home. Another thing we're looking to do is we have sunblasters, which are these type of grow lights, and the grow light system really, it comes with the tray and everything. And we're looking to start doing a little bit of indoor gardening. We might want to do some like microgreens over the winter, or maybe grow some herbs. We also, in the spring, we would like to start, or even late winter, start all of our seedlings that we'd like to grow in the garden next year. So our participants will be able to start the seeds themselves, and then later on in the season harvest the fruit. So we're just kind of waiting for an opportunity to start using them. And since the winter program, we've kind of going to start concentrating on in-class learning, per se, indoors. And we're going to start teaching about just basic gardening skills. We'll try to get our future food warriors all full of general gardening knowledge, so they don't have to ask to do everything, ask for everything next spring. They'll just be able to know what needs to be done. I also want to start teaching a bit of botany to lead into plant identification, because again, I say to be able to identify plants, like special wild edibles or even ornamental flowers that can be eaten will be a huge part in food insecurity. There's probably a lot of hungry people out there walking by plants that they can eat, and a lot of a lot of plants that we generally consider weeds in the gardening world are actually some of the more nutritious plants. So those are super underutilized, and I like to teach people how to eat them more. As well as we also want to continue with our documentary program, where you can learn from watching videos about climate change and food insecurity, agriculture. So now I'd like to move into a photo story done by one of our future food warriors named Ray. Ray couldn't be here tonight as he fell sick, so I'm gonna do the presentation for him. All right, so yeah, this is our sign at the Ajashki Heart Garden. I see Ajashki is misspelt in that, but I believe we fixed that later on with a new sign that we made. So the next slide, please. So yeah, in the beginning, it was pretty easy but busy. We learned how to harvest the vegetables, fruits, as well as how to plant, cage, stake the plants, and building new beds for them. So as I said, this photo story was done by Ray, so I'm just reading it from his perspective. But I was there, yeah, I helped. As you can see in the bottom right corner, those are our two future food warriors. That was the day I taught them how to prune tomatoes to get a better yield. And in the bigger picture, you can see the orange daylilies and a bunch of our garden beds in the back of them. This is fairly early on. By the daylilies blooming, we can tell it was in July. I think might have been our maybe second or third week maybe with Ray. As you see, the plants are still very small. And in the top picture, we have me with the two future food warriors planting a bed of raspberries on a day that I taught them all about how to grow, plant, and prune raspberries. Next slide, please. Did you know the reason we stake and cage tomatoes is not just to help them grow, but to help stop them from getting powdery mildew? Dun, dun, dun. Powdery mildew is an often found fungus that appears on plants that don't have very good airflow between them, causing high humidity. It usually infects the leaves, but can also be found underneath or on stems, flowers, fruits, or vegetables. So yeah, this is, I guess, an important tidbit he wanted to know, because we did have some serious powdery mildew on our tomato plants. I guess, yeah, a kind of powdery mildew can be caused by not enough water in some plants, and in some plants it can be caused by too much moisture. So I think it might have been a lack of water that caused these tomatoes to have it. As we weren't there every day, we only met once a week on Thursday to do the garden. So we struggled a bit with powdery mildew, but that didn't stop our harvest too much. Next slide, please. Afternoon walks, identifying plants and leaf parts. One of Ray's favorite parts of the day. He loved learning new things and exploring. Therefore, exploring all the plants and different things about the nature around us is fascinating. And you see in the picture, is me and Ray doing a little walk in the back of the garden. I was explaining to him on that day, we were looking at leaf shapes because we started getting into plant identification and a bit of leaf botany, because one thing I was really trying to stress is being able to identifying plants, having good identification skills, and that of course means learning a bit about botany and leaf shapes, sizes, all that fun stuff about botany. So yeah, that's me teaching them how to identify leaf shapes. Yes, next slide, please. Oh, yes. Okay, yeah. So this is another picture of the day I taught them how to prune. These are our two future food warriors here. So this is how the day I taught them how to prune tomato plants for maximizing your yield. So on the bottom, you wrote pruning, the removal or reduction of parts of a plant, tree, or vine that are no longer needed or beneficial to the health or development of the plant, usually done with secateurs. So secateurs is a gardening tool that I taught them how to use. So there, we're cleaning off all the tomato leaves that were unnecessary, because it's something that a Dutch relative of mine had taught my grandfather way back in the 70s, I believe. He came over from Holland, and when he was over here, he taught my grandfather how to prune all his tomato plants. And my dad said he never seen, they grew tomatoes every year, but that year my dad said they had barrels and barrels full of tomatoes, so much tomatoes that they had to give them all away to their neighbors. And that story always stuck with me. So now I always prune my tomatoes to try to maximize the yields as best as possible. Because yeah, the more food you have, the more you can give away, and that's what we're shooting for. So yeah, else in this picture, you can see also the 6 tomato plants in the front of it that we were kind of demonstrating how you can grow tomatoes in pots. We're really trying to demonstrate that for the reason that not all the future food warriors or participants were going to have space to have a full garden. So even if they can do container gardening, you know, that's at least a step to start gardening, even if it's just growing tomatoes on a balcony in a pot is a way to start. Yeah. Next slide, please. Okay, yeah, and so in here, these 3 pictures, the first one at the top left is, I believe that was the first time we made a donation to the Parkdale Food Center. As you can see, is a big bag of kale and a big bag of chard that we donated. It was pretty much the only things we had super excess of. So yeah, that day we bunched up a few bundles of kale and a few bundles of chard. And after the program, I went and delivered them to the Parkdale Food Center. The photo underneath that one is Ray with one of those red oak trees that I was talking about. That's when we went in the back of First U campus, where that wooded area is, and we went and planted like 5 or 6 red oak trees that may or may have not been removed by city workers. We'll have to wait and see if we can find them next year. But yeah, that's we were really talking about climate change and how everyone should start planting some trees. The next photo is a photo of 2 plants. The first one being an ever-bearing strawberry that was gifted to us by Mike. Yeah, so that one is we planted in the strawberry garden. We never actually got any strawberries because the squirrels, and I believe there was also a mouse in there eating the strawberries, but hopefully we'll have some better luck next year. We'll try to adapt to all the pests that are eating our fruit. And then underneath the strawberry, towards the right-hand side, you can see a small purslane. Yeah, right there. That's a plant called purslane. It's a wild edible. One day we took a bunch of purslane and I believe we put it in wraps. So yeah, that was a good example of one of the wild edibles that I taught them how to identify it, and we later on ate it. If for any of you who have never tried it before, it's pretty nutritious. It goes good in salads and stir fries. You probably do soups and stews as well. On its own, it's not very good, but I guess everyone has their own opinion about it. Next slide, please. We have lots of different types of friends out there. Yeah, so this is a slide Ray made, I guess, showing all the different types of little critters and beings around the garden. The first one's obviously of a snail on what looks to be yarrow. I don't think that was taken in the garden, but yeah, snails can be a pest. We didn't really have any problems with them. Second photo is one day when I believe we were digging a new garden bed, or we were working in the garden digging up some of the invasive species. We found a skull of what looks to be maybe a small squirrel or a mouse or something. I'm not quite sure. And the last slide shows a picture of a beetle. We didn't have really any problems with any small pests or critters. Again, our main problem was just the squirrels. Next slide, please. So yeah, in the first picture, you can see Sharon Bowen harvesting some peppers from our bed of peppers, which we then probably took inside to eat for lunch. I am there as well in the background, probably also picking peppers. As you can see, if you can see some peppers and stalks on the ground, we did lose quite a bit of peppers this year to squirrels who would rip them off the plant and take a few bites out of them and throw them on the ground. There was a lot of like partially eaten peppers that went into our compost this year, unfortunately, but that's the nature of the game. The middle slide, you can see, I believe it's Ray working on our tomato plants. I'm not sure if he's harvesting or pruning all the powdery mildew leaves off, or just pruning it for maximizing our fruit production. And the last picture is a picture of the blue spruce, Colorado blue spruce that's back there. It has our our tomatoes kind of got carried away there and they started crawling up it. So that was a quite thing. That's why we had the tomato steak, but yeah, they got pretty out of control at one point. Next slide, please. Okay, so the first picture is a picture very early on in the garden. As you can see, it's all the plants are still very small and leaves were blooming. So this was probably about mid July. I think this might have been either the last week we did before we got our first Future Food Warrior, or the first week that Ray came and was working in the garden. Yeah, so everything was still small then. And then the second picture on the right is much later on in the season. You see everything's much more lush and green. We have beds there of our kale and Swiss chard. That's when it was pretty plentiful. We were harvesting lots by that point. By that point, I'm pretty sure we had already made some donations to the Parkdale Food Center. As well, you can see in the background, we had some more, some of our other plants, tomatoes, peppers, zucchinis. And yeah, there's a small corner. We also did have some fennel donated by Mike. It didn't do very well. I think it was trampled by the squirrels, but we managed to get one stalk of fennel, which I believe you see in the picture, and we did end up using that one day in a soup, I believe, if I'm correct. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's the one. Can I get the next slide, please? Okay. Yeah. So this is the final slide. That looks like a juniper plant. Somebody must have taken a picture of the big one. On the top right, you can see a picture of Sharon, myself, and Ray all looking at the tomato bed that we built. In the bottom picture, you will see Lynn, Sharon, and myself. Not sure what we were doing in the garden that day, but it looks like we're busy. So yeah, thank you. And again, this was made, this credit goes to Ray Blanco for putting this slideshow together. Thank you. Okay, yeah. So yeah, moving along now, I'd like to talk a little bit about the future of what we would like to do in Ajashki. So we're looking to hire some more future food warriors. We'd like to get at least 4. I see us having maybe somewhere in the area of 4 to 10 participants, future food warriors. We like to focus on climate change, and because as of right now, climate change is a huge issue. I am sure most of you are familiar with what's happening in BC right now, and there's a lot of problems with their food system over there. They're having to fly in food into communities that are no longer accessible by road. And yeah, so yeah, also too, there's the supply chain issues due to COVID and everything else. So yeah, we really try to focus on that. As well, we like to expand our space to grow more food. We're looking into garden sharing, which means you share gardens with people who own property, where you go and you build and maintain a garden for them, and then you split the produce that's grown in that garden. We want to grow a lot more food next year, and we're hoping to do a lot more donations to the Parkdale Food Center, who are in need of, give it to people who are in need of it, which is really great, and we want to help them out as much as possible. As well as we'd like to have guest speakers, elders, knowledge keepers, artists, and Indigenous chefs come in to do workshops and teach. My partner had also volunteered to do a workshop on canning and food preservation, as she is very skilled in that department. She's way more skilled than I am. We're also looking to do field trips to farms and other places of relevance. I myself am looking to purchase a farm, and fingers crossed, hopefully I'll have my own farm next year, and we can always bring the future food warriors up there to start learning on a big scale farm level rather than the small gardens. So to do all this, we're looking to acquire more funding to do all the things that I mentioned. By doing these things, we really believe we can have a big impact on food insecurity in the Ottawa area. So all that being said, I'd like to introduce the video on the Parkdale Food Center, which we're going to watch. We've watched it already, and we thought it was very eye-opening and very informative. So I hope you all enjoy it.
So it's definitely happened to me, and my experience is that it's often following unexpected events in your life. It can kind of happen to anyone. Like I've experienced loss of a job, sometimes unexpected schools with fees. It can definitely be very challenging when you walk into a situation and you didn't expect to be there a month ago or a couple of weeks ago.
When you are living in poverty, it really sucks, and there's times where, you know, it's just normal to not eat, and you can go for days just fine until you're not okay, and then I find you'll do anything it takes to feed yourself, right? So it's really awkward to ask for help. You know, it takes a lot of courage, and sometimes, you know, you can really be in a vulnerable position and really put yourself out there and ask somebody for help, and they turn you down, right? Or they ask you for a document that you can't produce, or some other form of proof that you're desperate for help, you know, because you just saying that you're hungry isn't enough, right? You need to really prove that you're starving. So that's what I've seen.
Usually it's like the end of the month kind of thing.
Maybe the last week of the month, like the last time of the month too sometimes, so.
I feel the second part of the month, during the second part of the month, let's say around the middle of the month.
So I try to ration out and think of ways to make sure we get to eat later on.
Some months I might be okay when things go as planned. I remember with the pandemic, that was a huge shock. I had started a job at the beginning of the pandemic, and I was really excited and invested in it, and then all of a sudden everything fell apart.
So it kind of sets up this you know, monthly circumstance where you get money at the beginning of the month, you're able to buy a little bit of food because of course it's barely enough to cover your rent. Every month, the same cycle. You know, it's, we call it like sort of feast or famine, right? Check day, it's feast. You enjoy like the comfort of knowing there's food in your fridge for a week, and then you're back to famine again, and the cycle repeats.
I often was without food. There was like a smaller food center at our university, but it wasn't super well set up yet.
Yes, I have gone without food, but I would say here, if I didn't have families here in Canada, it would also be very, very difficult for me.
I think one of the wonderful things about being poor is the culture, and that's that you all take care of each other, right? So if one person has food or whatever other items you might need, generally I find that people are willing to share those things. I find that people are often willing to feed their children and take care of their children before themselves, and the same thing with their animals, right?
I'm a mother of 4 kids. I feed my family before I feed myself. So there are times they eat and there is not enough for me. I just get to do what I have.
I was terrified. I didn't know what to do. I felt lost. I felt alone. Not just my health has suffered, but oftentimes my schoolwork has suffered, a performance at work, and it's just like you feel kind of hopeless and you don't know what to do. And yeah, those moments are really hard.
That question can actually make you run mad. No food, no money. Your life is in shambles, you know. Your life is just devastated. Everything around you seems as if the world is going round around. You're feeling dizzy and stuff like that.
I was homeless more than 10 years ago and struggling to eat every day. And you know, we're 10 years later or more, and youth who are housed and unhoused and adults who are housed and unhoused are still struggling to keep food in their cupboards or food in their mouths every day. It's really depressing.
Beginning of the pandemic was actually rough, and then it kind of like declined after you know, after they lifted off the ban, and slowly we could get more shifts in work. So it was hard in the beginning of the pandemic.
Obviously a crisis for everyone, but it really hit the young people I know really hard. You know, people who had money were stocking up, right? They were going out and they were clearing the shelves of a lot of items that the young people would usually purchase, right? Like, you know, food that doesn't spoil, you know, canned goods that they regularly go and buy on check day were all gone. And the same thing with baby formula and things like that.
The pandemic has really made things difficult things are expensive. Everything has actually gone up more than it was initially. The Park Day Food Bank and other food banks around, they've been able to assist in providing some healthy meals and healthy veggies for homes like us and others to actually meet the healthy meal that is actually needed in the home.
Food is one of those things that can be very healing, right?
Especially food that are cultural. It helps me really really think of where I'm coming from. I was born in Cameroon, in Africa, West Africa. And I think when you eat food that is cultural, it makes you more stable and it really prevents you from being sick and it helps your situation cope.
Being able to get in all the nutrients you need in your life. I can't remember the last time I felt sick because I've been going into healthy meals, more veggies, carbohydrates, all the nutrients that is acquired, that is needed to make you grow healthy and strong.
My mental health is better, my physical health is better, like I'm able to go to volunteering, I'm able to function well and meet family and friends, you know, simple things pretty much as good food, good mood, you know, simple as that.
So I think that local food options need to be primarily accessible, affordable, and appropriate. We have an amazing mix of cultures throughout the city, and I think we really need to focus and realize how much that can help us thrive. There's a lot of great locally owned restaurants and businesses, and I think we really need to kind of mix that into what's available in the mainstream market and not make it something that's like sidelined or exceptional, but the norm to have culturally friendly and appropriate options at the supermarket.
This money should be used also to subsidize the food banks. They can really be able to break barriers in order to provide food for those who are in need like myself.
There's a lot of services in the city that sometimes just provide, you know, a basket of food, like it's all like KD or chips or canned soups, which is great sort of sometimes, but you don't get a proper nutritious value out of that, you know, you're not actually satisfied. You need proper protein, you need proper veggies like kale and broccoli. You want food that gives you joy, you know, not just food to survive.
Having people that are affected by food insecurity really sitting at the table in terms of making decisions about what needs to happen and giving their input is crucial.
I think people really need to wake up to the fact that there is a million gaps in service provision, right? Like a lot of times when I'm talking to people about the issue of youth homelessness, and some people write to me and they'll say, well, surely that's already taken care of. There must be a service that already provides this thing for young people, right? And it's not their fault they believe that, right? That's common sense. Like, okay, we live in the capital city of Canada. There must be a government resource or some other resource that's taking care of these people, right? But there isn't, right? We all need to wake up and realize that it's community organizations like Parkdale Food Centre, and it's grassroots organizations like Ottawa Street Medics, and it's people on the ground, it's neighbors taking care of their neighbors. That's the only reason there aren't more people dying.
And also be like a donor, like some kind of like, even if it's $1, $2, like donating that to something, like as small as you can, and you're donating to food banks, you're getting involved in your community, right?
We can position ourselves as people who our neighbors wouldn't be shy to come up and ask for help when they need it. And that we would know that our neighbors, when they asked us for help, they weren't going to fear judgment or that we would turn them down.
Here's our last one. If you had all of the resources in the land, what would you need to affect meaningful change?
So something I would say would be, the first thing would be tackling power.
To feed everybody, make sure everybody's fed. I would make sure everybody's fed in the world, well, in Canada or even the world too, so. Because there's a lot of places out there other than us that are worse too, but that's what I would do.
One thing, if you have a lot of resources, is actually saving them. There's a lot of food that goes to waste. Even I've worked in a grocery store before, and I know folks who work in like the restaurant industry. There's all different locations where food gets thrown out, and it's so unfortunate. We do have ample food in this world, but a lot of the times it doesn't reach the people who need it.
Wow. Well, like, now let's say I have everything. I think I'll reach out, do a survey, see what people desire, know what they want, and plan towards it to make them happy. If I have everything, everybody will be comfortable. I think I'll be able to do that. No election, I'm not campaigning.
What comes to your mind when you think of a right? Life, expression, thought, liberty, security? Well, yes, those are basic human rights. Dispersed and discussed like they are rights, set to help and sustain human life. And so is good food, a light that often brings people together, a predictive tool for good health, a weapon of transformation, universally significant. We celebrate, mourn, share, and love all around food. Yet this food is deprived from the poor, vulnerable, and the minorities due to a system rigged by the authorities, often ignored by many like it's not a priority. Over 800 million people in the world are hungry, desperate, fumbling, and some described as angry. Yet food is constantly being produced. While some lucky ones wake up and say plenty, the other unlucky ones say empty. The right of food is a fundamental human right, yet food security affects millions of humankind. Children, mothers, fathers, it sees no kind. Black, white, indigenous, it sees no color. Is it fair to know that some individuals are deprived of their right? And well, we think it's alright? Is it ignored because it's not affecting many whites? Not crossing many heights? Not causing enough fright? Well, maybe it's time to rewrite. Make food security a shared prosperity. A shared prosperity that is available, accessible, adequate, and acceptable. And the good news is that you can be part of this shared prosperity.
Thank you so much, Kayoki. That was wonderful. And I'm sure that people have questions. However, I'm not seeing any in the chat yet. So I would encourage people, if you have questions for Kayoki, and I'm sure there's questions out there, to please just send them to me in chat or to Maury in chat, and we'll pose the questions. Maybe Kayoki, do you want to speak just very briefly about how the Food Warriors were funded, or is that something that maybe Sharon could speak to?
I don't mind speaking to it unless Sharon wants to. but I don't mind. She might not be able to because she wasn't part of the program, but I don't mind speaking to it. So we got funding for the two future food warriors, Ray and Jordan, through Youth Services Bureau. Sharon, the miracles that she does, contacted them and got them. I know she was quite the process, but she got them to convince them to, hey, let us hire these people who will be working in this program and developing skills, and also pay them. I forget the wage that was agreed upon, but she got them. It was a decent enough wage, I believe, like something like $17 an hour. So yeah, we got that by Sharon. Yeah, in the Youth Services Bureau.
Great, thank you. And I understand there may also have been some funding from Nature Canada towards one of the food warriors. So that's great. And yes, Sharon is amazing at finding those sources of grants. So that was great. So I do have a question about how the food warriors were chosen. Can you want to speak to that one?
Yeah, so being at the start when we first got this program on the way, COVID was still a really huge thing. So we didn't really have much like ways to kind of outsource it. So we actually just contacted Youth Services Bureau, and they were the ones who actually, we told them like, this is what we're doing. And they're the ones who actually sent us Ray. And then I believe Jordan was through, I don't think they were from somebody else, another kind of community kind of program, who also found out about it and then contacted us and say, hey, I have somebody who is interested in your program. They would like to attend, and then that's how we got Jordan.
Great. So a totally different question here, and that's about pollinators, and asking about what the pollinator situation is around the church.
So in my few months there, I think I've seen maybe a couple of bees around the area. I don't think I've seen too much. I mean, they must have been there though, because our I believe peppers need to be pollinated. So if I'm correct on that, yeah. But there must be some. But yeah, I didn't see too many. But I'm sure there is. In meditation gardens, I know there's a lot of few pollinator-friendly plants that are there. So. But yeah, that's something maybe we could even work on for next year. I might even write that down and include more pollinator-friendly plants around the Ajashki garden anyways.
Great. During your presentation, you mentioned the possibility of expanding the garden. I mean, we're hoping that you'll be able to expand it even on first use site. We have a proposal before property committee now to do that. But you mentioned about using kind of other neighbors' properties, like and doing kind of almost a land sharing. So are you looking for garden space in the nearby neighborhood? And if so, when and how should people connect with you?
Yeah, that's a great question, actually. Yeah, so we're definitely looking in the nearby neighborhood, or any of members of First U who would like to run a garden sharing program with us. It would be easier for us, I think, to go with members of First U, easier because you do have to set up like a kind of legal document to do so. But yeah, we were also thinking we could also put out a flyer in the local area to see if anybody has property. So yeah, either in the I think we actually did talk to somebody, I think next door to the First U campus, there was a construction going on, and we did talk to the owner of, I think it's like a duplex or a small condo area, who would be interested. But yeah, if any members of the First Unitarian or if anybody close by would be interested in garden sharing, you can get my contact information, I'm sure, from somebody from First U. And yeah, and contact me, Sharon, or Lynn. And yeah, we'll be in contact with you, and then we could talk.
Great. And another question about the food warriors. So were they Indigenous or different backgrounds?
So we got different backgrounds for the ones that sent to us. So Ray is Colombian, is where he comes from. But Jordan is Métis. They were sent in us through somebody else. Yeah, so they are Métis. So we had one. Originally, we had planned to do like half non-Indigenous and half Indigenous participants, but with some of the funding that we might be getting, we look like we might have to be switching to kind of all Indigenous participants. But as of right now, we had one of each. And we also have a new future food warrior who's been joining us in the last 2 weeks named Declan, who is also Métis.
Great. And you did mention that you hope to get to the point of having 10 food warriors. How much garden space would you need to do this? And what is your vision for this?
Yeah, well, so definitely the more the better, especially if we had 10. The garden in the back of First Shoe probably wouldn't cut it at that point. I'd have to kind of get smart and try to develop other things to do with the 10. But yeah, if we were going to do that, we had 10 future food warriors, we'd probably need at least a good maybe 5 or 6 other gardens, maybe yard sharing close by somewhere where we could travel with, as well as if I get my farm that I'm trying to do, it'd be nice to have the future food warriors come up there to see what I do with my herbal tea company, as well as my permaculture. They could help me on my farm. Would be a great benefit for me and a great benefit for them as well, because I do a few different styles of gardening in my personal life that they could also attend and learn from as well.
Great. So question about hydroponics and whether you've thought about growing food using hydroponics during the winter months.
That would be a great idea. I believe we might have discussed it before. I actually don't know that much about hydroponics. We did, in my class at Camosun College, we did have a hydroponic table where we did grow some greens that the students got to take home. But it would be definitely something to look into. The only thing is a hydroponic table can take up a lot of space depending on the size of it. I know you can buy smaller sets, but yeah, it would be nice to have a big hydroponic system somewhere where we could be producing fresh greens for our participants, plus Parkdale Food Center all winter long. That would be great.
Always good to dream big.
That's true.
Yes. And there's a question about, well, first off, a comment saying that the person thinks it's a great project. So thank you for that. And asking about how big the plot is at the church campus. And there's probably a lot of people who, because of COVID, haven't seen. And I know for some people, there was a fair bit of surprise. There was actually a sunny enough location on the church property to actually have a garden of this nature. So can you give just a rough sense of the church, of the size, and also whether there's anything you're excited to try out growing there? So you're looking at any change in crops for this coming year?
Oh yeah, sure. So for anybody who's ever been back there where the garden is, we've been growing from the blue spruce to the fence. If I had to say, give it a measurement, I think it was about 24 feet wide by about maybe about 20 feet 20 feet by 24, if I'm correct. It's not a very huge plot. We utilize the space as much as we can. 6 garden beds, so 7 garden beds in there. Yeah, so in terms of other crops that we would like to do, the greens seem to do a lot better back there than the other crops. A lot of the peppers, and so we only got 1 cucumber over the course of the season, and then everything else was eaten by the squirrels. So I think we'd like to do more greens, because then we'd have more success. So that would include things more kale, more Swiss chard. Maybe we could do some spinach. I think broccoli might do very well. I've never seen squirrels eat broccoli, but squirrels are pretty hungry, so who knows? Yeah, and I would focus more on the brassicas rather than plants that have fruit that would be eaten by the squirrels. Yeah, so I'd say greens would be the way to go, and especially if we start garden sharing, then we can grow maybe some of our more fragile plants, if you will, crops at some of the other places, while concentrating more of our brassicas and such at the First Shoe Garden.
And of course, when we think about indigenous crops, we could often think about the Three Sisters.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And corn, squash, and beans, right?
Yeah.
Any thought about planting any of those?
Yeah, I think that it would be a great idea, especially if we ended up getting any Mohawk participants, as that's a Mohawk permaculture technique. The only thing is I've done it before and you kind of need a bigger space to do it. I'd probably make it fit in a smaller space, but most of the things I've read about it is like generally people are doing like taking up a massive space to grow like many stalks of corn and a few squash take up a huge area. So if we did get more space, it's definitely something that I'd like to consider because it is a great to show a symbiotic relationship between three plants and a great example of permaculture techniques. So yeah, it's definitely something I would like to try.
Now I noticed that Werner had his hand up, and I'm wondering, Maury, whether we could unmute him so he can ask his question verbally.
Yes, he should be able to unmute.
Oh, yeah, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes, we can.
When you're talking about yard space, if there are large trees, does that make the space non-usable for you?
Yeah, so generally to be able to use the yard, we need at least 6 hours of sun. We're kind of shooting more for 8 hours of sun. For most vegetables, you need 8 hours of sun. Even the space in the back of First U is like Eva said, it's surprised that we were actually able to grow back there because that's only about maybe 6 or 7 hours of sun, maybe 8 during the midsummer months. But yeah, so we would be looking for spots that have at least a good 6 hours of sunlight to be able to work on.
And you can you estimate that by looking at it, or do you have to actually measure the one?
Yeah, so I guess you'd have to kind of stand there over the course of a day once the tree canopy comes in, or even just look at it multiple times during the day and seeing where the sun is and seeing if it has enough sun exposure at enough points during the day.
That's the trouble. We love our trees and we love our gardens, right? So to have space for both is a challenge sometimes. So one other question, well, a couple other questions. What did you do during the dry periods? And what did you do for water?
Okay, good question. So we were harvesting water from the roof at First U, and we had a rain barrel, which we then used. During the drier months, there was actually a hose already set up not too far that we were actually just grabbed and used to water. Some of our crops may have suffered a little bit during the drier months. Luckily, Sharon and Lynn were kind enough to go down during the weekends and earlier on during the week to water. So that's how the garden was kind of able to survive. We did mulch, but the squirrels would always like dig through the mulch. So the mulch wasn't as effective as we hoped it would be. But yeah, it was really, I think, Sharon and Lynn going into water that really kind of saved the garden during the dry months.
What I'm hearing is next summer you could use more volunteers, maybe even from Unitarian House, who are prepared to go in and water when you and the other food warriors are not on site. So that's just something, folks, for you to keep in mind for next summer and be prepared to volunteer. So just one other quick question, and then I'm going to turn it over to Bill. Where are the red oaks from?
That's a good question. So my brother got he's a tree planter. I'm also an ex-tree planter, but he had a contract in Kitagan-Zibi to plant red oak trees, and they have like a program up there where they do firewood for all the elders, and then they replant the area with red oaks to reforest. So he finished planting all the areas that need to be planted, and he had excess red oak trees. And so they're currently sitting in bags at his house. And so I'm trying to help him by taking the red oak trees and delivering to people who might plant them.
Great, great. And I know that the Ecology Ottawa tree giveaway that was held at the church, Ecology Ottawa really was thankful for the red oaks that you provided for the tree giveaway. So there was just one other comment that I don't know what to do with this, from Mike Fletcher, saying Kayoki stopped us from eating spruce by accident. Thank you. So I don't know what that's about. I'm sure there's a story behind it.
It's not spruce. It's not spruce. It's sprue. Sprue.
Sprue. It is sprue. I thought you just spelt it wrong. So sprue by accident.
That was Perlene.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, yes, I did actually. Yeah, I remember I went to his place and did some plant identification there.
Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Bill, but thank you so much for Kayoki, and thank you everyone for your questions.
Thanks for having me.
Well, my first privilege is to say thank you. And firstly, I'd like to say thank you to Kayoki and your team on behalf of the congregation. Our whole congregation is very happy to have the opportunity to join with you and work with you on the Ajashki Food Security Project. It's for us, it's an honor, it's a pleasure, and it's an opportunity to learn about Indigenous peoples and about Indigenous traditions. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. And of course, it's also an opportunity for us to work towards reconciliation, which we all need to do. And then more specifically, of course, I'd like to thank you and Ray for his work on the slides, the pictures, for your presentation today. It's really been an eye-opener. It's been marvelous. I mean, I thought I knew something about what you've been doing, but I mean, it's amazing. It's not just growing vegetables. You were harvesting wild plants and creating your salad, your pesta salad from natural plants from on the property. And you of course, you contributed to Parkdale Food Center. You had an experience as part of your project of going to Beechwood Cemetery and being part of all that process, of course. What a rich experience, the whole thing altogether. And thank you so much for sharing that with us today. So many thanks. And my second task is to let everybody know that the Ajashki project would appreciate some financial contributions. You can make financial contribution to the church and designate it as being for the Ajashki project. And there's another way of doing it too. The Ajashki works as a food growing consultant, and you could hire him as a consultant to advise you on how to do your gardening and how you might do that. And then you can make payment for his work through a contribution to the church, and that can be applied towards the costs of the Ajashki project. That's a pretty clever scheme. It sounds to me like it's a win-win-win. Everybody wins. The garden wins, and your tax return wins, and Kayoki and the project wins. So that's something to keep in mind. And finally, I have a few closing words to close this part of the program this evening. And thank you to Eva for finding these. These words are by Robin Wall Kimmerer, the author of Braiding Sweetgrass, Indigenous Wisdom, Scientific Knowledge, and the Teachings of Plants. And she says, even a wounded world is feeding us. Even a wounded world holds us, giving us moments of wonder and joy. I choose joy over despair, and not because I have my head in the sand, but because joy is what the earth gives me daily, and I must return the gift.